15 years in Arizona, and I could finally admit it. This was the most peace I'd ever known. Before that, I grew up in a small town, so far out in the sticks, I can't even remember what state it was in, or if it was even in America at all. It was the kind of town swallowed whole by dense, looming woods, shrouded in an atmosphere so heavy it felt hard to breathe. All I remember for sure is its name, Point Pine. 10 years I spent in Point Pine, until the summer I turned 10, when my family up and left, never to speak of the town again. Not that I blamed them. I realized later my parents were trying to bury Point Pine. When classmates asked where I was from, I learned to say, "Oh, just some small town. You've never heard of it." I learned quickly that questions about Point Pine had a price. A few months after we moved to Arizona, my older sister Felicity had a school project, something about family history. She chose to write about our life in Point Pine, about all the weird things she remembered about it. My mom found her project the day before it was due and burned it in the backyard. That evening, when Felicity got home from school, my parents sent her straight to her room. I heard her sobbing through the walls, racked with a grief that felt different from any sadness I'd ever known. After that, neither of us mentioned Point Pine again. Except, here I am, telling you all about it. I'm not sure what's brought it all back. These memories I thought I'd locked away in the darkest recesses of my mind. Maybe it's because my dad died a week ago. Since then, my mom hasn't said a word to anyone, hasn't even cried. She mailed his ashes off to God knows where. Point Pine. I'd bet money on it, though I'm not sure I have the guts to ask. And ever since then, these fragmented memories of our time in that town have been creeping in. Things that seemed normal at the time, but now, looking back, I realize how truly bizarre they were. For one thing, there was the Point Pine Bakery. The owner, Terrence, always knew what you were going to order before you even stepped up to the counter. I remember the kids in town used to whisper that Terrence was some kind of mind-reading magician. Not only that, but when it came time to pay, you weren't allowed to use money. You had to give Terrence a piece of old clothing you didn't wear anymore. There was a big bin next to the cash register where everyone just tossed their old shirts and shoes. That was just one of the many, many strange things about Point Pine, and it wasn't even the half of it. On your birthday, every year, every single resident of Point Pine had to get their blood drawn. Nobody knew what it was for, what they were looking for. All we knew was that your birthday always started with a trip to Point Pine Labs. Then every single morning at precisely 8:13 a.m., an air raid siren, the kind they have at theme parks and military bases, would blare through town, rousing everyone awake. Immediately, parents would be screaming for their kids to get up, yanking them out of bed like the house was on fire. Sometimes, I wondered if it actually was. All the different schools in Point Pine were scattered around different parts of town. Point Pine Elementary in the east, Point Pine Middle School in the west, Point Pine High School right smack in the middle of town, and Point Pine Community College up on a small hill in the south. You get the idea. Every place in town was called Point Pine blah blah blah. Point Pine Cafe, Point Pine Strip Mall, Point Pine Grocery Outlet, you name it. But the strangest thing about Point Pine by far was the town parade. It happened once a month, without fail. Nobody knew exactly what day it would be, and each month, one student from Point Pine High was chosen to participate in it. The strange part was, we weren't allowed to look at the parade. Not from the streets, not from our windows, not even on TV. It was like the number one rule in Point Pine. Whatever you do, don't look at the parade. In fact, you weren't even allowed to be outside when the parade passed through. We always knew when it was starting because it happened the same way every time. You'd hear this chanting like a church choir, singing this eerie, discordant melody. It was like no music I'd ever heard before or since, like a lullaby sung by a demon. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, the sky, the ground, the trees, the buildings, like everything in Point Pine was singing. Once you heard that first note, you had 5 minutes to get inside a house or a building that locked. This might sound hard to believe, but there weren't that many buildings in Point Pine that actually locked. So, if you were caught outside when the chanting began, you basically had 3 choices. One of the schools, the employee break room at the Point Pine Bar and Grill, or the walk-in freezer at Point Pine Pizza. One year in August, my friend Lee and I decided we were going to break the rules and watch the parade. Thinking back now, I wonder why more kids didn't try it more often, because if you tell a kid they absolutely can't do something, well, you know what happens. Since we had no idea when the parade would come, where it started, or what route it took around town, we figured the smartest thing to do was wait in the woods near the Point Pine Library until it passed down the main road. So, we spent most of August hanging out at the library. Around the 3rd week of the month, we were sitting on the library steps, gossiping about some girl in our grade when we heard the music start. Lee and I exchanged a panicked look and bolted into the woods, while everybody else scrambled toward the nearest building. We ran deep into the woods, far enough that nobody on the street could see us, but close enough that we could still see the road. We huddled low in the brush and dead leaves, whispering to each other as we waited with bated breath for the infamous parade to arrive. That year, the student chosen from Point Pine High was a girl named Reed, a friend of my sister's. She was a few years older than me, but she and Felicity had become close because Reed lived next door. "Dude, I see it," Lee whispered excitedly. I strained my neck to see what he was looking at. I was always a small kid. Even now I'm shorter than most guys my age, or any age, really. So Lee always had at least a foot on me. "I don't see anything," I hissed back. "Shh, they'll hear you." I shut up, craning my neck to try to catch a glimpse of the parade. Oh no, oh God, no. Suddenly, Lee crumpled to the ground, his hands flying to his head. He curled up in a ball, groaning. "What? What is it?" I asked, my eyes darting between Lee and the road. "I saw her. I saw the girl," he said, his voice trembling. "Reed?" I asked, still scanning the road for any sign of the parade. Lee grabbed my arm, yanking me down to the ground. "Ow!" I yelped. "What are you doing?" I hissed, but Lee just shook his head frantically, his eyes wide with terror. "You don't want to look," he whispered. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw real fear in Lee's eyes, the kind of fear that chills you to the bone. I turned away from the road, looking down at Lee. "What did you see?" I whispered. They did something to her. They're eating her, Cody. But she doesn't even care." Lee was shaking now, tears streaming down his face. I turned away from the road, no longer wanting to see. The chanting was getting closer now. "Cody!" I heard a voice, high-pitched and sing-song, calling my name. "Don't look," Lee whimpered. "Cody, Cody." The voice sounded just like Reed. "Watch us, Cody." I squeezed my eyes shut. The chanting continued for another minute or so, and then I heard Lee start to wail, a sound of pure primal terror that I will never forget. I kept my eyes squeezed shut. Then, just as quickly as it started, the chanting faded, along with the sound of whatever the hell else had been happening on that road. It was only when I heard the telltale sounds of people emerging from their hiding places that I dared to open my eyes. I reached down and pulled Lee to his feet. He stood up, but his head remained bowed, his eyes fixed on the ground. "Lee, what is it? What's wrong?" I asked, my voice shaky. I heard him sniffle, and something wet and warm splattered on my hand. I realized with a jolt that Lee was crying, sobbing, really. "Lee?" He finally lifted his head, and when he did, he looked straight at me. "They took my eyes, Cody," he whispered. I will never forget the look of Lee's empty sockets, the blood trickling down his cheeks, the ragged edges of skin where his eyelids used to be. I threw up in the woods, and it was a long time before I could bring myself to lead him out of there. Some adults saw us and called my parents, and that was it. The next day, my family left Point Pine. I never found out what happened to Lee after that day. As soon as we left Point Pine, my parents resumed their charade of pretending it never existed. They never spoke of it again, and I was too afraid to ask about Lee. As far as I know, he was the only person who ever looked at the parade, and he paid a terrible price. I don't know if Point Pine is even still there. Part of me wants to go back and see what became of the place, but even if I knew how to get there, I don't think I ever could. Something tells me I wouldn't be welcome. And even after all these years, I still can't shake the feeling that somehow, some way, my parents are still connected to that town. My name is Lily Madwip, and I see things. Things that haven't happened yet. Quit staring at me, creep. That's Roger, my brother. He doesn't see things. I know this because if he did, he'd see the death looming over him like a vulture circling its prey. But maybe he does see things, and those of us who are gifted just can't see our own futures. I don't know for sure. All I know is that in approximately 3 minutes, Roger will be dead. "You're going to die," I tell him, the words a chilling whisper in the mundane hum of the car. "Are you threatening me?" he snarls, his voice thick with teenage disdain. Roger is 6 years older than me. He's in high school and has 2 friends, Skeeter and Dustin. They wear sleeveless shirts with the names of heavy metal bands printed across the front. Sometimes they gather in the garage and try to make music like those bands until my dad goes out and yells at them to stop. At his funeral, they'll wear suit jackets and ties, their hair slicked back, a grotesque parody of respect. After that, I'll never see them again, which is fine. I love Roger because he's my brother, but things will be quieter when he's gone. Sorry, Roger. "No," I say, my voice small but steady. "I'm just warning you. I love you, Roger." "Shut up, freak." He punches my shoulder, and I cry, a practiced performance, because it doesn't really hurt. My mother's head whips around from the front seat, her eyes pinning us both with a look of weary regret. I know she doesn't really mean it, but all parents think it sometimes. I wonder where I'd be if I'd never had children. No, I'm not a mind reader. I just know these things. "Can you two be quiet?" Mom asked. But it's not a question. It's a command. Grown-ups can give commands disguised as questions. If you're a kid and you try to do this, it doesn't work. I once tried to command Roger to give me back my Pasker doll by asking him, and he laughed and twisted Pasker's head clean off. Mom had to glue it back on, but she's not good at fixing toys, so now it sits a little crooked. I told her I didn't mind, that it gave the doll character. My parents think it's weird that I named my doll Pashar. I don't know why. Pashar is an angel. People don't think it's weird if you name your doll Gabriel or Michael or Layla, but name it Uriel or Gavriel or Pashar, and everyone gives you funny looks. I clutch Pashar and stare out the front windshield. There's a sign that says, "Rest stop 1 mile," and below it a smaller sign that says, "Next rest stop 46 miles." At the rate Dad's driving, I figure that's about half an hour. "Rest stop coming up," Dad announces. "Anybody have to pee?" A few hours ago, we stopped at McDonald's, and I had a cheeseburger with fries and a small Sprite. I couldn't finish the burger or the fries, but the Sprite settled my stomach because I sometimes get a little car sick, so I drank all of that. I do need to pee, but this is where Roger dies, so I lie. I don't. The thought of needing to pee makes me even more uncomfortable. I cross my legs. Roger notices. "Lily has to pee. She's wiggling. I don't want her to pee on me." He makes a disgusted face, and I get not wanting someone to pee on you. But Roger, I'm trying to save your life. Mom looks back again, and I shake my head at her. "Lily, if you need to go." I don't. "She does, and I do," Roger declares. "I don't think Roger actually has to pee." Dad pulls into the rest stop access road, ending the conversation. There are 2 lanes, one for big trucks and one for smaller cars. Our station wagon takes the second lane and curves around to climb a hill to the rest stop parking lot. There's a large boulder on a pedestal with a memorial plaque at the base with a lot of names of people who have died. Other families are going in and out of the glass building. I wonder how far we are from the nearest hospital. "Everybody out," Dad declares. "Lily, come on," Mom says as she unbuckles her seatbelt and opens her door. I give Roger one last look and try to smile. He looks back at me. For a second, there's a flicker of awareness in his eyes. I think maybe he'll close his door and stay in the car. Then he sneers at me, and the moment passes. "Quit staring at me, creep." "Watch your mouth, Roger." Dad says it in that tone that means he doesn't really care, but he has to pretend he does so Mom doesn't get mad. We all get out of the car. Mom holds my hand as we cross the parking lot, even though I'm not a little kid anymore. I keep looking back at Roger and Dad, waiting for it to happen. Roger is going to die. I know it. I just don't know how. Maybe that big boulder will fall off its pedestal and crush Roger like a boot stomping on an ant. I've stepped on ants before. I always say I'm sorry afterward, but by then it's too late. I wonder if his insides will be all crushed like the ant. The boulder doesn't crush Roger. My mother takes me into the women's restroom where we do our business. The toilets are the kind that flush automatically. They always scare me. Like, I think the toilet I'm sitting on won't detect that I've left and will flush anyway, and I'll get sucked down inside. I pee. But the whole time, I'm waiting to hear screams and cries from outside. Maybe Roger got sucked into an automatic toilet. My mom has a word for things like that. Just deserts. Roger doesn't get sucked into an automatic toilet. We meet back in the lobby area, where there's an information desk and little cubbies filled with tourist maps and brochures for hotels and water parks. I want to look at one for the drive-through safari zoo, but Dad is in a hurry to get back on the road, so Mom pulls me back to the parking lot. We pile back into the station wagon with empty bladders. I'm feeling a little confused because Roger is still alive, and it's been at least 10 minutes since I knew he was going to die. I don't say anything about it because my parents don't like it when I talk about premonitions, as they call them. Besides, I don't want to jinx it if I'm actually wrong. Roger is kind of a jerk, but he's my brother and I love him. I hug Pashar and look out the window as we pull out of the parking space. Suddenly, Pashar is ripped from my arms. I turn, startled, to see Roger holding the doll out the window, dangling it by one leg. He grins at me, a malicious glint in his eyes. "Hey, creep, want to see if your dolly can fly?" I realize this is it, the moment. I can't not say anything. "This is when you die," I tell him, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. Roger's sneer is replaced by a flash of anger. He drops Pasker, and the doll disappears beneath our wheels. In anguish, I scream, lunging for my seatbelt, as if I could somehow launch myself out the window and snatch Pasker up before it's gone forever. Mom turns around and starts yelling about what just happened. Dad yells back at us to be quiet. "Lily, stop screaming. Roger, what did you do? Roger, what did you do?" My dad is looking in the rearview mirror at what he considers his two biggest mistakes. My mom is glaring back and forth between me and Roger. Roger is looking at my parents, trying to affect a look of innocence, as he lies and says I started it. Only one of us is looking at the big truck lane we are merging into at Dad's typical high rate of speed, and that's me. I see it out Roger's window, a monstrous semi with multiple large tires and a massive trailer behind it, hurtling toward us, the driver in the cab looking as shocked and confused as I feel. I'm not screaming about Pasker anymore. I'm screaming for Dad to brake or swerve or something, but he can't differentiate between types of screams, and it's too late anyway. Do you know what a T-bone is? I always thought it was a kind of steak. My Uncle George once ordered a T-bone at a restaurant, and he got this huge piece of meat with the bone still in it. That's why they call it a T-bone, because the bone is there, and it looks like a T. Apparently, a T-bone is also a type of collision where one vehicle slams into the side of another vehicle, because the two vehicles make a T shape, just like the bone in the steak my uncle ordered. That's what the semi did to us. It T-boned us, right in front of the entrance to the interstate. The nearest hospital was 23 minutes away. I never would have guessed that number. They took Roger and my dad there in ambulances. Dad had a dislocated shoulder and a lot of cuts and bruises. Roger was airlifted to Boston Memorial Hospital. He got to ride in a helicopter, although he was unconscious, so he missed out. He died of internal injuries before he got there. Mom and I were treated for various minor cuts from the glass and stuff. The truck driver was okay, but shaken up by the whole thing. I hope he doesn't blame himself for Roger's death. It wasn't anybody's fault, but Roger's. One of the EMTs who treated us at the scene found Pashar and gave it back to me. It always finds its way back to me. The EMT asked me what my doll's name was and gave me a funny look when I told him. I didn't tell him that he was about to get a call for an elderly woman having a stroke in some place called Middlebury. That kind of mundane information gets tuned out by most people, like how I know my parents will cry and hug each other and worry about Roger until they find out he's dead. Then Dad will become more distant because he secretly blames me. It's not a secret, Dad, I know. And Mom will hold me tighter every night at bedtime. I see it, but they don't need to know I see it. I hope Roger is in a better place, but Pasker tells me he's not. Pasture is always right. The reek of stale alcohol clung to me like a shroud as I stumbled home at 11 p.m. Exhaustion gnawed at my bones. I collapsed onto the sofa, lit a cigarette, and fired up YouTube on my laptop. Some vapid travel vlog flickered on the screen, barely registering when the front door clicked open. My roommate, a quiet, almost spectral presence, drifted in, hung up his coat with unsettling precision, and vanished into his room. Standard operating procedure. He was a man of few words, only speaking when spoken to, but impeccably tidy and non-confrontational. I couldn't fault him. My attention drifted back to the screen. 5 minutes later, the hiss of the shower started up from his room. Nothing out of the ordinary. I was halfway through a bare-knuckle boxing compilation, eyes drooping, on the verge of oblivion. Then I woke up. Darkness pressed in, my head a throbbing drum, my throat parched. I sat up slowly, waiting for the dizziness to subside, and fumbled for my phone. 3:30 a.m. My stomach growled, a hollow ache. I shuffled towards the fridge, and then I heard it. A steady, subtle, yet persistent sound. It took me a few seconds to place it. The shower. Fragments of the night before slammed back into focus. Drinking, the cab ride home, the laptop, the sofa. My roommate coming home. The shower. I froze, trying to rationalize it. Had he fallen asleep in the shower? Impossible, I thought. Or had he slipped, fallen? The horrifying image spurred me into action. I ran to his room, but the bathroom door was locked. I hammered on it. "Hey man, you all right in there?" Silence. I considered kicking the door down, but decided to call 911 first. I pulled out my phone, ready to dial, when I saw an unread text from my roommate. "Hey, couldn't sleep. Crashing at my girlfriend's. Not sure when I'll be back." Sent 2 hours ago. I stared at the bathroom door, then back at my phone. None of it made sense. Firstly, my roommate rarely texted, let alone to announce his whereabouts. Secondly, I was fairly certain he was single, and had been for a while. And thirdly, who the hell was in the shower? I called him. No answer. Texted him. Nothing. I went to his desk, his keys and wallet still sitting next to his laptop. My head began to spin. I fled his room, flicked on the living room lights, pacing like a caged animal, trying to piece it together, trying to ignore the sound of the running water, a sound that had never been so terrifying. Then I heard a buzz from the kitchen counter. His phone. Panic surged. I grabbed my keys, bolted out of the apartment, and down to the lobby. But it wasn't far enough. I ran across the street to the McDonald's. I sat there for a while, intending to call the police, but a strange paralysis gripped me. Even though the restaurant was practically deserted, I felt suffocated, the air thick and heavy. I decided to leave, stepping out onto the deserted street. Instantly, I felt a prickling sensation, the feeling of being watched. My eyes were drawn upwards, towards my apartment. I saw someone standing on the balcony. A tall, gaunt silhouette, motionless as a mannequin, but not a mannequin. If I looked closely, I could see a slight swaying. I froze, my mind unable to comprehend, unable to accept what I was seeing. It wasn't my roommate. It was too tall. In fact, it was so tall it couldn't have been anyone I knew, its head nearly brushing the balcony of the floor above. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make out any details. The darkness and the distance could have been a factor. But something told me otherwise, that this thing simply had no details to observe. that it was just a pure, condensed mass of shadow. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but a whispering voice in the back of my mind told me that if I ran, it would follow. I retreated back into the McDonald's, locked myself in the bathroom, and finally managed to call 911. I told the operator that someone had broken into my apartment, but I had escaped without them knowing, and they were still inside. It was the closest I could get to the truth without sounding insane. The operator said they would send someone, told me to stay put. I emerged from the bathroom and waited at a table near the front door until flashing red and blue lights slid through the night. I went outside to meet the police, glanced up at the balcony, saw it was empty, but the living room door was still wide open. They bombarded me with questions, my answers fragmented and incoherent. Was the intruder armed? Did I know who it was? What were they doing? I said I didn't know. I didn't understand, but they kept asking. Finally, I almost screamed at them to go up there and see for themselves. And perhaps the terror in my voice finally made them take it seriously. They told me to wait by the entrance, and I watched them enter the building. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, growing increasingly anxious about what they would tell me when they came back down. A few minutes later, a gunshot echoed, flat and heavy. My heart plummeted. I continued to wait, unsure what else to do. 20 more minutes of silence passed, and still no sign of the police. Soon, I heard the sirens of more police cars approaching. Everything after that became a blur. 4 more police cars surrounded the building, officers shouting, phones ringing constantly, more questions hurled at me, none of which I could answer. The building was evacuated. Residents panicked and confused as they were herded outside, while the police grew increasingly frantic. I heard sporadic gunshot, shouts, strange, unidentifiable sounds. My memory of what happened next is hazy, but I remember being shoved into the back of a police car. After being taken to the station, I was led into an interrogation room where 2 men in suits were waiting for me. They didn't introduce themselves, instead launching into a barrage of questions, each one more bizarre than the last. What company does your roommate work for? What's his job title? How many people have been inside your apartment since your roommate moved in? Have you ever heard voices inside the apartment between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m.? Voices that weren't your roommates. Have you ever seen a group of people standing outside your apartment between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m.? Very tall people? And one of the most chilling. Have you ever seen anyone standing at the end of your bed when you woke up between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m.? If so, do you remember what they looked like? Any distinguishing features? As they continued their interrogation, my mind began to dredge up strange occurrences that had happened since my roommate moved in. Things I had dismissed as hallucinations, simply because I had no other explanation. I had heard voices, always emanating from the room next door, where my roommate slept. I was always incredibly tired when I heard them, but I remembered it sounding like a young woman, or a man with an incredibly deep voice. I never made out any words. It always sounded like meaningless murmuring. And then there was the time I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Still half asleep, I hadn't turned on the light when I entered. But as my eyes began to adjust to the darkness, I could have sworn there was someone sitting on the toilet. Someone very tall. Of course, when I flicked the light on, there was nothing there. At the time, I easily attributed it to sleepiness, and I never thought about it again. After I had done my best to provide any helpful information, the 2 men in suits spent a few minutes making notes on their phones. When they were done, they stood up abruptly, told me they would be in touch, and left the room. A police officer came in a few minutes later, told me that since I couldn't go back to my apartment, they would put me up in a nearby hotel until they got the situation under control, and I should stay put until they called. "What happened?" I asked him. "What did you find up there?" He stared at me for a long moment, not as if he was thinking, but as if he deeply resented having to say whatever he was considering. Finally, he just shook his head. "I don't know," he said. "I really don't know." I nodded, trying to smile even though I was sure it didn't look anything like a smile. It's now the next day, and I'm in the hotel. I can't sleep, of course, can't eat. The police officer still hasn't called. When I try to search for information about the evacuation online, all I find are articles saying it was due to a fire. A goddamn fire. Update. I drifted off and just woke up. It's 1 a.m. and I hear the shower running. The monster wore my father's face. His rages, fueled by something dark and insatiable, sculpted my childhood into a grotesque parody of hide and seek. He'd unleash his fury on my small frame with the savage glee of a predator, his roars echoing through our isolated house, a tomb nestled amongst a thicket of suffocating trees. My mother, a ghost tethered to a flickering cigarette, haunted the kitchen, her whispers of his nightly escapades adding a chilling harmony to the symphony of my terror. Escape was my only solace. I became a master of the unseen, a phantom flitting through the shadows. Closets, the dryer, even the suffocating space beneath the bed became my sanctuary. Hide and seek wasn't a game. It was survival. One night, as the tremors of his impending rage shook the very foundation of the house, I sought a new haven, the crawl space beneath the back porch. A gaping maw in the rotting wood beckoned, promising a darkness deeper than any I'd known. The autumn air bit with icy fangs as I scrambled out the window, clutching my threadbare blanket and a plush hippopotamus, my only comfort in a world of pain. I wormed my way into the crawl space, splinters digging into my skin, dirt clinging to my tear-streaked face. The air inside was thick with the cloying scent of damp earth, a suffocating blanket of cold and decay. But it was spacious, a terrifying expanse of nothing. Shivering, I curled into a ball, the fear of my father's wrath a more potent chill than the biting wind. Then, a voice, sweet as poisoned honey, slithered through the darkness. "Darling, are you cold?" It wasn't my mother's rasp. I turned, my heart hammering against my ribs, to see the hazy outline of a woman, her face obscured by shadow, a delicate butterfly necklace shimmering faintly in the gloom. She was covered in the same clinging mud as me. I nodded, mute with terror and confusion. How had she gotten there without me noticing? She crawled closer, her movements unnervingly fluid, and enveloped me in an embrace that radiated an unnatural warmth, like a bonfire built on bones. I nestled against her, the mud and fear momentarily forgotten. "You've grown so much," she murmured, her breath ghosting across my cheek as she peered at my face. "How old are you, Alex?" "6, I whispered, a flicker of recognition igniting in my mind. I knew her. But how? The memory was shrouded in a chilling fog. "6 already!" she exclaimed, her voice laced with a disturbingly high-pitched joy. "You're such a big boy. Mommy's so proud." Her hand stroked my hair, a gesture so alien yet so comforting it sent a shiver down my spine. "What's your name?" I asked, the question a fragile shield against the encroaching unease. "Lily, what do you like to do best?" I thought for a moment. "I like checkers and coloring." Lily's laughter was a brittle, unsettling sound. "Just like me. I love Scrabble, but you're probably too young for that, aren't you?" I nodded. "Too many letters. But I want to play. I like letter tiles. Will you play with me?" Lily took a deep, shuddering breath. I can't. Daddy keeps me locked in here. I can't get out. But..." She paused, her voice taking on a pleading edge. "Alex, can you do something for me?" Of course. She was so kind. How could I refuse? "When you wake up in the morning, go to the police station. Find an officer named Lowell Joyce. Tell him Lily is under the crawl space. He'll come and get me out, okay? And then we can play Scrabble." My excitement blinded me to the choked despair in her final words. I nodded eagerly. "I will. We'll be on the same team, right?" Lily's laughter was a chilling whisper. "I'll teach you the rules. Sleep tight, Alex." The next morning, Lily's voice woke me. "Go. Daddy's gone to work. I'll tell you how to get to the police station." I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and crawled out from under the porch, back into the house to grab my shoes and coat. The cold seized me, but the thought of Lily just behind me spurred me on. I started walking. The journey felt impossibly long, like walking to a neighbor's house in a nightmare. I don't remember how long it took to reach the police station, or why no one stopped a 6-year-old in muddy pajamas wandering along the road. Lily's voice continued to guide me. "Wait, okay. Cross now. Turn right here. Keep going straight. Almost there." I was near collapse when I stumbled into the station. The officers chatting cheerfully by the door didn't see me until I was almost at the front desk. "Hey, kid, are you okay?" An officer knelt down, his face etched with concern. I nodded. "I'm okay. I need to see Lowell Joyce." Another officer scooped me up. "All right, kiddo. All right. Let's get you somewhere warm. Good Lord, your lips are blue." I vaguely remembered gently chiding him for swearing. Shit was a bad word. They gave me hot cocoa and wrapped me in a blanket. An older man with a silver mustache sat down beside me. "Hello, son. I'm Chief Joyce. What's your name?" he asked. "Alex." I set down the mug and looked him straight in the eye. "Someone told me to tell you that Lily is under the crawl space at my house. You need to go get her so we can play Scrabble." I've never seen a grown man's face drain of color so quickly. Everything after that is a blur. I remember being taken back to the house, a swarm of police cars and onlookers. Yellow tape cordoned off the back porch, someone carrying a black bag while my father was led away in handcuffs. I ended up living with my grandparents, who it turned out were Chief Joyce and his wife. I tried asking about what had happened, about who Lily was, but I was always brushed off. I was too young to know. But life got better. So much better. He was the best man I could have asked for. We went to the movies on weekends. He let me have giant sodas, even though I had to pee halfway through. He let me try a sip of beer when I was 13. I spat it out and never touched it again. He never judged my artistic endeavors, letting me repaint my bedroom countless times over the years. I felt safe with him. He never hit me. She was just as wonderful, homeschooling me along with things school didn't teach, like how to respect others, but not let yourself be bullied. And cooking. Lots of cooking. I could bake my own birthday cake by the time I was 12, but I usually made them for friends. I had a lot of friends after I got away from my father. When I was 16, he took me back to the old house. It had been bulldozed, but I could still see the remnants of yellow tape clinging to a few trees, faded and tattered. We sat together on the tailgate of his truck. He cracked open a beer, took half of it, then set it down, handing me an orange soda. After I finished it, he told me, "Lily was your mother." It was a good thing I wasn't swallowing, or it definitely would have come out my nose. "My mom?" I echoed, confused. "Your birth mother. The woman who lived with your father wasn't your mother." He grabbed another beer. "Lily was my daughter. I loved her so much, but when you were about 6 months old, she disappeared." My stomach twisted. My father kept her under the crawl space? I asked, starting to feel sick. He took a deep breath before setting the unopened beer down. "That's something I've never understood. Lily told you to find me, and that she liked Scrabble?" "Yes. She kept me warm that night. I probably would have frozen to death without her." I was being stupid. Even I knew that. He was silent for a moment, then opened the beer and drained it. "Alex, Lily had been dead the entire time she was missing. When we dug her up, it was just bones. The experts confirmed it, and your father confessed. They had an argument, and he pushed her down the stairs. She broke her neck." He clenched his fist. "I knew he was involved in her disappearance, but I never had any proof until you walked into the station, covered in mud, and told me she was under the crawl space." I was numb. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was shake my head. "But I saw her. She was alive. She was wearing a butterfly necklace." I trailed off as he pulled an evidence bag from his shirt pocket. It was the butterfly necklace, rusted, and some of the paint chipped. But I remembered it as clearly as I remembered Lily's voice. He took a shaky breath as he placed the bag in my hands. "Lily loved you very much. That's why she stayed with that bastard. You were her whole world. She kept taking pictures and sending them to us in the mail. Sometimes a mother's love can do things no living person can." Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the necklace to my chest. Choking back sobs, I leaned against him. He held me tight, and I swore I felt a few of his tears fall on my head. And just for a fleeting moment, I swore I felt that same unnatural warmth I'd felt that night under the crawl space. The Lonely Diner. The name itself sends a chill down your spine. It sits isolated on a desolate stretch of highway connecting Carson City and Reno. I work here not out of passion, but because life's cruel hand dealt me a losing streak, leaving me stranded on a dead-end road. Anyone stuck slinging hash after graduating college, especially in a diner marooned in the middle of nowhere, knows their life hasn't exactly gone according to plan. But why this diner? Why the Lonely Diner? Money. $50 an hour. An unbelievable wage compared to other greasy spoons in the area. And the sole reason for this exorbitant pay, him. The first few days were uneventful. I grew accustomed to the eccentricities of the clientele, the unspoken rules of the establishment. This area spotless, that area ignored. Serve quickly but not too quickly, allowing the customers to wallow in their solitary melancholia. They came here for the loneliness, ironic as it may seem. The cook followed suit, the food adequate, never terrible, never exceptional. A carefully curated mediocrity. Then one day, I dared to ask the owner about the ludicrously high wages. Her response was chillingly nonchalant. Rules are paramount here, especially the important ones. You're joking, right? She fixed me with an icy stare. I don't run this place. And following the rules here means looking out for yourself. Then, with a cryptic edge, she added, there's more to this place than just you and this diner. Weeks later, I saw him. A man sitting quietly in the far corner, brown coat, short hair, about 50, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Before I could approach, the owner grabbed my arm, her face a mask of terror. The important rule, don't go near him, don't talk to him. But he's a customer. Her grip tightened, her voice a hiss. Don't ask, just do as I say. The consequences are dire. I watched him from afar. Unlike the other patrons, he didn't exude loneliness or nostalgia. He was curious, a casual curiosity, yet unsettlingly intense. He appeared once a month, like clockwork. I tried to pry information from the owner about him, but all I got was, I don't know. Then one day, the owner fell gravely ill, coinciding with his usual visit. My curiosity finally overwhelmed me. Hello, can I get you something? I called out. He turned, feigning deafness. I repeated the question, louder this time. Excuse me, miss, he replied, his voice disconcertingly normal. I couldn't quite hear you. Could you come over here? I shook my head. I don't mean to be rude, he continued, but I don't think anyone's taken my order yet. I turned away, trying to ignore him. He vanished as mysteriously as he arrived, without a sound. The following week, I was summoned to a meeting with a sharply dressed man, an earpiece nestled in his ear. He stared at me, then turned to the owner. How long has she been working here? 6 months. Do you trust her? I do. He turned back to me. Last week, the Wanderer came. The owner was out. You were not. Tell me everything. The Wanderer? That's our designation for the man in the corner booth, or rather, the government's diner. I'm sorry, what? Precisely. Congratulations, you're part of a clandestine government operation. The Wanderer isn't just a nickname. It's our legal definition for this conundrum. He's a phenomenon we've been tracking for years. At first, he just wandered the desert, asking strange questions to strangers. Harmless enough, a bit odd, but not illegal. However, sometimes strange, terrible things happen around him. Have you ever apprehended him? I asked. No, not because we don't want to, but because it might not be safe. He's from... I didn't attend any more meetings after that. Not because I was forbidden, but because I didn't want to know anymore. The curiosity had evaporated, replaced by a creeping dread. The agents, the police, their frequent presence in the diner, now a chilling reminder of the true nature of my employment. They'd come at the end of the month, observe him from a distance, taking meticulous notes. He remained the same, just sitting silently, doing nothing, saying nothing. The high turnover rate at the diner suddenly made sense. No one spoke of it, but I knew they all felt the unsettling presence, the unspoken fear, I stayed. Not for the money. I didn't even know why anymore. Then came Malcolm, a new employee, eager, enthusiastic. The alluring pay probably drew him in, like a moth to a flame. The owner and I tried to warn him. There are strange things here. Rules you must follow, no questions asked. Laws of nature, like gravity. And if you can't do that, if you don't think you can look out for yourself, you shouldn't work here. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach when he appeared the same week Malcolm started. The owner and I stayed glued to the counter, intercepting anyone trying to leave the kitchen area. Malcolm emerged, carrying a trash bag. I grabbed his arm. "Remember the rules I told you?" He nodded. I pointed to the man in the corner, brown coat and all. "No matter what, you don't serve that man. Don't approach him. Don't talk to him. Pretend he doesn't exist." "I'm just taking out the trash," Malcolm said. "But I understand." He walked out the front door. I turned back to the Wanderer. There were quite a few agents in the diner today. He suddenly spoke. "Gentlemen, if you have any questions, come to my table and ask." The agent scoffed. "I'm serious. If you join me, I'll tell you everything. Truly." The laughter grew louder, but no one moved. "I know you're curious. I know you take notes. I know you talk about me. I know you built this place for me. I know you." The chime of the front door rang out. Malcolm entered through the side door, right next to the Wanderer's table. It happened so fast. The Wanderer stopped talking, his voice shifting to a pathetic whine. 30 visits, and the service is terrible every time. Malcolm instinctively pulled out his notepad. "Hello, sir. Can I help you?" Then he froze. The Wanderer grinned, a wide, unsettling grin. His neck twitched, as if with overwhelming excitement. He stood, and then they were both gone. A voice boomed over the loudspeaker, shattering the sudden silence. "Code Black. Wanderer target has abducted a civilian. I repeat, a civilian has been abducted." Days later, the owner quit. She wasn't angry with me. She said she always knew she'd leave after the 10th disappearance. Why 10? I didn't know. I continued to work. Driving home, I'd look up at the star-studded sky and pray for Malcolm's safe return. The debriefing with the agents offered no comfort. Where did he take him? The answer, he's gone. The gnawing dread became a constant companion. The only lesson learned was to be more careful, more vigilant. And on the days the Wanderer came, I would be the only server on duty. No exceptions. The agents weren't happy, but there was nothing they could do. They needed the Wanderer for their research, their understanding. We were animals in a zoo, kept for their observation. At the end of the month, he appeared again. But this time, he walked through the front door in the dead of night as I was preparing to close up. I stood frozen at the cash register as he approached. I was certain I was about to die. He smiled. "Don't worry. I have my own rules," he said. I remained silent. "I know you're curious about me. I was quite amused when you initiated contact. Cautious curiosity is a commendable trait, especially in a reckless species such as yours. I'll tell you why I come here. Would you like to know?" He laughed, a chilling, hollow sound. "The answer is quite simple. This game, this play, it's all so very entertaining. Your planet is fascinating. I'll be back soon. I promise. Give me a month or two. I'll return with a new game." And then he was gone. On the counter beside me was a cake box. Perhaps it had been there all along while he spoke, or perhaps it materialized the moment he vanished. I opened it. Inside was Malcolm's severed head, his face blank, resting on a pile of clumsily arranged flowers, as if someone had tried to make a bouquet, but didn't quite know how. Scrawled across the top, in childish handwriting, "I brought him back, like you wanted." The worst thing about being stuck in a diner in the middle of nowhere is realizing there's nowhere left to run. The star-studded sky stretches across the planet. Anyone could appear at any time. This story clings to me like a phantom, a hazy memory from when I was 7. Time may have veiled it in dust, and logic screams its impossibility, but deep within, the unsettling feeling persists, clinging with an unnerving tenacity. It was a bustling Tokyo subway station. I stood beside my father when I saw it. A towering monstrosity, cloaked in shaggy black fur. Its leathery wings, the color of clotted darkness, unfurled behind it, and a maw like an anteater's yawned at its center. I was paralyzed, eyes glued to the grotesque creature, until a voice, like gravel scraping across tombstones, slithered from its depths. "That human looks strange," it muttered, as if it can see me. "I can see you," I replied, voice trembling. The demon flinched, almost leaping from the ground. You can see me?" "Yes. Can't everyone?" I asked, naive to the horror unfolding. "Not unless they're attuned to the 5th dimension." Am I in the 5th dimension? Curiosity momentarily eclipsed fear. "Perhaps your mind wandered here. What were you thinking about before you saw me?" I racked my brain, then offered a playful smile. "Trains." "Ah, yes, trains. The threads between our worlds. Perhaps your mind strayed. Or perhaps you're simply going mad." "I hope not." I shook my head, a chill snaking down my spine. "But in the 5th dimension, madness is a gift," the demon chuckled, a hollow echoing sound. I giggled nervously. "Are there subways in the 5th dimension?" "Of course," it replied matter-of-factly. "How else would we get to work?" "But you have wings." I pointed at the monstrous appendages. "Wings are overrated. Trains are faster, and nobody wants to arrive at work drenched in sweat." "Then what do you use them for?" "Rain protection." The demon's nonchalance was unsettling. "Can I see?" I asked, both terrified and strangely drawn to the creature. "Very well." With a groan, it unfurled its wings, engulfing a swath of the station in an unnatural shade. My hair whipped around my face as if caught in a gale. I burst into laughter. "You're huge." The demon chuckled, but the sound died quickly, replaced by a profound sadness. "Are you all right?" I asked, my earlier fear momentarily forgotten. "You seem sad." "Ah, yes," the demon mumbled, its gaze seeming to pierce through me, fixed on some distant point beyond. "Say, child, want to see a magic trick?" "Yes." It reached into its maw, pulling out a giant, rainbow-colored handkerchief. It kept pulling and pulling, until the fabric stretched for what seemed like miles. I giggled, but the sound died in my throat as I realized I was no longer holding my father's hand. Panicked, I looked around. The bustling station was gone, replaced by an endless meadow dotted with rusted, ancient trains. "Where's the station?" I whimpered, fear finally taking hold. "It's all right," the demon said, its voice strangely soothing. "Sometimes it's better to see what isn't there than what is." "What do you mean?" I was lost, adrift in a sea of confusion and terror. Sometimes when I grow bored, my mind drifts to the third dimension, and I see humans like you. "That's weird," I mumbled, my voice small and scared. "Can you go to other dimensions too?" But the demon didn't answer. It looked up at the sky, now a canvas of brooding gray. "Rain's coming," it said, and its wings unfurled once more, shrouding us in darkness. Warm raindrops splattered on my face. "Can I stay under your wings with you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm afraid not," the demon replied. "It's time for you to go home." The world around me began to blur, colors melting into a swirling vortex of green and yellow. I felt dizzy and closed my eyes against the disorientation. The spinning sensation stopped, but the warm raindrops continued to fall on my face. When I opened my eyes, my mother was sobbing beside me, but my father was gone. "Where's Daddy?" I asked, confused. "Didn't he bring me home?" "Yes, sweetheart," she choked out, unable to meet my gaze. "He brought you home, and then he had to go." "Oh," I replied. "When's he coming back?" I don't know." He never did. It wasn't until much later that I learned the horrifying truth. My father had taken his own life that day. He'd left my mother a suicide note that morning, saying he was taking me with him. She found it upon returning from work and immediately called the police, but it was too late. Witnesses claimed that just as he jumped, I'd wriggled free and run, collapsing soon after. But one witness, a child around my age, claimed to have seen a strange creature pull me back from the tracks. A creature he described as tall, with shaggy black fur, leathery wings, and a maw like an anteater's. Thank you for listening to this chilling tale. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more stories that will send shivers down your spine.